I didn't cry. Not when I found out. Not when I sat across from her at that kitchen table and watched her smile like she hadn't just tried to hollow me out. I poured her coffee, set the mug down gently, and kept my hands very, very still. That's the part nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always make you shake. Sometimes it makes you go very quiet, in a way that feels almost peaceful, because you already know exactly what you're going to do. Let me back up. My name is Joelle. I'm 28. I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio. And for most of my life, I believed that family was the one thing you could count on, even when everything else fell apart. I believed that until about 14 months ago, when I found a document on my dining room table that made me understand, very clearly, that some people will smile at you every Sunday dinner and still see you as a resource to be drained. My father remarried when I was 19. My mother had passed 2 years before that. Breast cancer, 11 months from diagnosis to the end. And I won't pretend those years weren't hard on him. They were. He went quiet in a way I didn't know how to reach. And then he met Renee at a church fundraiser, and 6 months later she was moving boxes into our house like she'd always lived there. I tried. I want to be honest about that. I tried with Renee for years. I showed up to her dinner parties. I complimented her decorating. I called her on her birthday. I watched my father come back to life around her, and I told myself that was enough, that whatever discomfort I felt was just grief wearing a different coat. She never warmed up to me, not really. With my dad she was soft, attentive, almost girlish. With me there was always a formality to it, a measurement. Like she was calculating something behind her eyes and hadn't decided yet whether the number was worth her effort. I told myself I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. I found out what she actually thought of me on a Wednesday afternoon in March, when I came by my dad's house to drop off some paperwork he needed for his taxes. He wasn't home. He texted me to just leave it on the counter, and Renee was in the kitchen on a phone call. She didn't hear me come in. I set the folder on the counter and was about to leave when I heard her say my name. I stopped. "She's 28 years old," Renee said. "She makes good money. She has no kids, no mortgage, no real expenses. That account has been sitting there for 3 years. 3 years, and she's done nothing with it. It's just sitting." I stood very still by the front door. "I'm not saying take it all," she said. "I'm saying we have an opportunity and it would be stupid not to use it." There was a pause. "She won't find out right away. She barely checks that account. I've seen her statements. She set it up after her grandmother died, and she just lets it accumulate. It's basically dormant." I left before she finished the sentence. I sat in my car in my dad's driveway for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the clock on my dashboard go from 3:47 to 3:58, and I didn't move once. Then I drove home, and I started doing what I do for a living. The account she was talking about was an investment account I'd opened when my grandmother passed 4 years ago. Grandma Ruth had left me $31,000, every cent she'd saved over 50 years of working, and I put it in a brokerage account with the intention of letting it grow until I had a plan for it. By that March, it had grown to just over $47,000. I checked the account statements more than Renee apparently assumed. I just didn't talk about money the way some people do. I did not touch the account. I did not call my father. I did not confront Renee. What I did was set up account alerts I'd never needed before. Email notifications for any login attempt, any transaction, any change to contact information. I also quietly moved the bulk of the funds, $44,000, into a separate account at a different institution, one that Renee had no possible way of knowing about. I left $3,200 in the original account so it still looked active. Then I waited. I want to explain something about my job, because it matters here. Forensic accounting is not glamorous. It's not like the movies. It's mostly spreadsheets and paper trails and learning to see the story that numbers are trying to tell you. What I'm good at, what I've always been good at, even before I knew there was a career in it, is pattern recognition. I can look at a set of transactions and feel where something is wrong before I can even articulate why. My supervisor calls it instinct. I call it paying attention. I paid attention. 3 weeks after I'd moved the money, Someone logged into the original account from a device that wasn't mine. The login happened on a Tuesday afternoon at 1:14 p.m. I was at my desk at work when the alert hit my phone. I didn't move from my chair. I forwarded the email to my personal account, then went back to the report I was writing and finished my sentence before I let myself feel anything. The login had come from my dad's home IP address. That night I pulled the account access logs going back 18 months. There had been 4 previous logins from that same IP address, all on weekday afternoons, all between noon and 2 p.m., which is when my dad would have been at work. He works fleet management for a logistics company. He's out of the house by 7 and rarely home before 5:30. Renee worked from home. I documented everything. Login timestamps, IP addresses, device fingerprints, the works. Then I called a friend of mine from grad school who practices law in Cincinnati. She specializes in financial crimes, and I described the situation without naming anyone. She walked me through what I was looking at. Unauthorized access to a financial account, even without a successful transfer, can constitute computer fraud under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. If she'd managed to initiate a transfer, we'd be looking at wire fraud. If she'd used any forged documentation, my signature, my social security number, anything that was identity theft on top of everything else. Has she tried to take anything yet? My friend asked. Not successfully, I said. I moved it. There was a pause on the line. Good. Okay, what do you want to do? I thought about my grandmother. I thought about 50 years of careful saving. I thought about Renee on that phone call saying, it's just sitting. I want to make sure she can't do this to anyone else, I said. Here is what I found in the following 6 weeks, because I want you to understand this was not impulsive, this was careful. Through the access logs and some additional digging with my friend's guidance, we determined that Renee had not just been watching my account. She had actually applied for a personal loan in my name at an online lender. A $15,000 loan, applied for using my social security number, my date of birth, and my old address, which she would have gotten from documents at my dad's house. The application had been flagged by the lender's fraud detection system and denied, but the inquiry showed up on my credit report. I had not applied for a loan. I pulled my full credit report that same evening. There it was, a hard inquiry from a lender I'd never heard of, dated 5 weeks earlier. 1 inquiry. 1 attempt. Denied. But an attempt is still a crime. I also found something else, something that made me sit back in my chair and stare at the ceiling for a long moment. In a shared family Google Drive folder, the one my dad had set up years ago so we could all access vacation photos and shared documents, there was a folder labeled Household Finances. I had been added to the drive years ago and honestly forgot it existed. Inside that folder was a spreadsheet. It was labeled Family Investment Planning J. I opened it. It was a list of my assets, not estimates, actual figures. The investment account balance updated quarterly. My 401k balance, which she could only have gotten from documents she'd seen at my dad's house. My approximate salary, which was close enough to accurate that it made me uncomfortable. A column labeled Accessible with various amounts highlighted in green. At the bottom of the spreadsheet there was a note in the comments field of one of the cells. It said, "Are confirmed ache still passive, no activity flags. Window open through Q2. R was her. She'd confirmed it to someone. There was someone else involved. I took screenshots of everything. I downloaded the full spreadsheet with metadata intact. Google Sheets keeps a revision history, and that history showed the document had been created by Renee's Gmail account and last edited 4 days before the loan application was submitted. I called my friend back. "Okay," she said, when I'd finished explaining. "This is bigger than we thought." "I know. You need to decide whether you want to go civil or criminal, or both." "Both," I said, "but I want to do this right." What followed was 6 more weeks of preparation. My friend connected me with a criminal attorney in Columbus who handled financial fraud cases. I compiled everything into a single organized file: the access logs, the credit report, the spreadsheet with its revision history, screenshots of the Google Drive folder, a timeline of every suspicious login. It was the most thorough document I have ever prepared, and I've prepared some very thorough documents. During all of this, I kept going to Sunday dinners. I kept calling my dad. I kept being, as far as anyone could see, the same Joelle I had always been. Renee poured my coffee and asked about my work, and I answered her questions and smiled and said everything was fine. It was not fine, but it would be. The reason I waited, the reason I didn't just go straight to the police the moment I found the spreadsheet, is that I wanted the full picture. I wanted to know who our confirmed was talking to. I wanted to know if there was a second person involved, whether this was an isolated attempt or part of something larger. My attorney agreed. We were building a case, not just filing a report. There's a difference. We found the second person eventually. It was Renee's younger brother, a man I'd met maybe twice at family gatherings. He'd been in minor financial trouble for years. Nothing criminal, just bad decisions catching up with him. The theory which my attorney laid out clearly once we had enough documentation was that Renee had intended to take the loan out in my name, hand the cash to her brother, and allow him to repay it over time while she covered the monthly payments from household funds, without my father ever noticing. A loan I didn't take out for money I didn't receive that I would eventually discover on my credit report and be responsible for. The plan had been surprisingly detailed for something so fundamentally stupid. My attorney filed the police report in late May. I was not present when they went to my dad's house. I'd asked to be kept out of that part. Not because I was afraid of the confrontation, but because I didn't want to be the one standing there watching my father's face when he understood what his wife had done. I found out later that my dad hadn't known, at least not the full scope of it. He'd apparently been aware that Renee was keeping an eye on my finances, which is its own conversation, but he hadn't known about the loan application, or the spreadsheet, or any of the access logs. When the detectives showed him the documentation, he reportedly sat very still for a long time and didn't say anything. I know that feeling. Renee was charged with unauthorized access to a computer system, attempted identity theft, and wire fraud for the loan application. Even a denied application submitted fraudulently constitutes wire fraud under federal statute, which my attorney explained carefully and which I found genuinely satisfying to learn. Her brother was charged as a co-conspirator. Both of them lawyered up within 24 hours, which was their right and which didn't change anything. My father called me the evening after the police visit. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was 4 minutes long and mostly him crying, which is the longest I've ever heard my father cry about anything, including when my mother died. I listened to it twice, and then I set my phone face down on the coffee table and made myself a cup of tea. I called him back 3 days later. We talked for a long time. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't know. He said he should have seen it. He said a lot of things that were probably true and some things that were probably him trying to make sense of something that didn't have a clean explanation. I said, I know you didn't know all of it, but you knew enough to know she didn't belong in my financial life and you let it happen anyway. That's going to take me a while. He said okay, which was the right answer. I'm not going to tell you I cut my father off entirely because that's not what happened. We talk, we see each other. It's careful and a little formal now in a way it wasn't before, and I don't know yet whether that's permanent or just what healing looks like up close. I'm giving it time. Renee accepted a plea deal 4 months after the charges were filed. She avoided the federal wire fraud conviction, her attorney negotiated it down, but she pled guilty to the identity theft charge and received 2 years of probation and a $12,000 fine. Her brother pled to the conspiracy charge and got probation as well. Neither of them went to prison, which I want to be honest about, because I know that's not the ending some people want. What I wanted was not for her to suffer. What I wanted was for there to be a record, a permanent, searchable, court-documented record that says, this woman used her access to a family situation to attempt to steal from her stepdaughter. That record exists. It will exist when she applies for jobs. It will exist when she tries to open financial accounts. It will exist when anyone with a search bar and 5 minutes decides to look. That's the housewarming gift I gave her when she and my father separated 3 months after the plea deal. I didn't show up to the new apartment she rented. I didn't send a card, but I did make sure the public court records were accurate and complete, because public records are public for a reason. I thought about my grandmother a lot during all of this. About what it means to save carefully for 50 years and then trust someone with what that adds up to. I thought about how Renee had looked at that account and seen an opportunity, a window, a passive asset waiting to be redirected. She had looked at my grandmother's life savings and seen a gap in someone's attention. I want to tell you that the money was never really the point, and it wasn't, not entirely. The point was the spreadsheet. The point was, window open through Q2. The point was that she had been watching me, categorizing me, assessing my vulnerabilities for what the revision history suggested was at least 2 years. 2 years of Sunday dinners and birthday calls and complimented casseroles, and the whole time she was running a quiet calculation. I run calculations too. I'm just better at it. The account my grandmother left me has grown. I moved it to a wealth management advisor I trust, someone my friend from law school recommended, and I check it regularly now, not out of anxiety but because it's mine. And I earned the right to know exactly what's in it at all times. I'm buying a condo next spring. I have a plan. My grandmother used to say that money is just stored work, that when you save, you're not saving dollars, you're saving hours of your life that you can spend later on something that matters. She pinched pennies for 50 years, not because she was afraid, but because she was patient. She knew something would eventually be worth spending it on. I know she was right. Closure isn't forgiveness. It isn't reconciliation, or a final conversation, or a hug that makes everything add up cleanly. Closure, I've learned, is a set of well-organized documents, a guilty plea on file at the county courthouse, and the knowledge that you protected something that was worth protecting. I poured the coffee. I kept my hands still. And then I went to work. There's a spreadsheet I still think about sometimes, not because it scared me. It did, at first, but because of what it revealed about how certain people move through the world. Renee had labeled a column accessible. She hadn't written stolen or borrowed or even borrowed with permission. She wrote accessible, like my grandmother's 50 years of careful saving was just a door that hadn't been locked yet. That word told me everything I needed to know about her character. And character, I've come to believe, is the only thing that actually predicts what a person will do when they think no one is watching. What Renee didn't account for, what people like her rarely account for, is that the choices you make in private are still choices. They still have weight. They still set things in motion. She spent 2 years building a quiet plan, and every step she took left a record, because dishonesty requires maintenance, and maintenance leaves marks. The IP logs, the revision history, the hard inquiry on my credit report. She was careful in some ways and completely careless in others, because I think she believed I wasn't paying attention. She had assessed me as passive, as a window left open. I wasn't passive. I was just patient. I think about my grandmother a lot when I reflect on this. Ruth worked as a home health aide for most of her adult life. She clipped coupons. She drove a car until it stopped running rather than take on a payment. She didn't talk about money the way some people do, as a scorecard or a signal. She just moved through life with a kind of quiet steadiness that I didn't fully understand until I was older. She wasn't building wealth for its own sake. She was building options. She was storing work, as she used to say, so that someone she loved would have more room to move in the world. What Renee saw as passivity was actually inheritance, not just the $47,000 the disposition, the habit of watching carefully and acting only when you're sure. That's not naivety, that's discipline. I needed every bit of it during those months. There were Sunday dinners where I sat across from Renee and made conversation about nothing while knowing exactly what she'd done and exactly what I was building. That kind of sustained calm doesn't come from not feeling anything. It comes from feeling it completely and choosing, deliberately, not to let it make your decisions for you. I was angry. I was genuinely, bone-level angry. I just didn't give that anger the wheel. And then there was the actual work. 6 weeks of documentation, 2 attorneys, access logs, revision histories, a credit report I'll never forget pulling. I'm a forensic accountant. I have a skill set that most people don't have, and I used it, but the skills alone don't matter if you don't have the willingness to sit with something difficult for as long as it takes to do it right. A lot of people find out they've been wronged and either do nothing or do something too fast. Both outcomes protect the person who wronged you. Neither outcome protects you. Renee is on probation. The record exists. My condo closes in April. I don't believe the universe intervened on my behalf. I don't think justice is automatic or guaranteed. What I believe is simpler and, I think, more useful. That integrity is a long game, that attention is a form of protection, and that the most powerful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is let them. Grandma Ruth knew that. She just never had to prove it in court,